Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Friday morning, April 24th. Um, as always, interesting times. We're definitely getting the sense of, society starting to look towards the future. Or it feels like on our end, we're turning a little bit of a corner, obviously. Sense of what's the next stage? How do we try to move through this and reopen society? What are we looking at there? On the one hand, I just am excited and grateful that we are looking at that. It's a nice place to be compared to how things have been for the last couple months. And but there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So there's another layer of adjustment that we're all going to have to make, and how do we navigate uh, you know, trying to reintegrate, move back into the workplace, move back into society, interacting. And it's also just a normal, an interesting way to think about, we've all done this pretty amazing thing of sheltering in place and isolating ourselves physically while trying to maintain some social contact through many different online formats. It's just a really interesting time to kind of, do what we're doing with some conscious intention and think about, what have we learned from this situation, and what are some of the really beautiful and amazing ways that the world has shifted, and nature returning to unusual places. Images of coyotes running around in San Francisco, or there's been a number of different images. There's a bobcat in Southern California, Southern America. I don't know if anybody saw that, but there's bobcat prowling, the cities as they were more quiet and less people around. And so, I just think it's you know really important that we all move intentionally for safety, and make sure that we're being careful and safe, and taking the steps that we need to um, do this in the most responsible possible way, but also with certain sense of choice and internal record keeping, almost, of what do we want to how do we want to be different, how do we want to have some of what we learned in this really unprecedented experience hold forth in an ongoing manner for how we all reintegrate together. So again, I think and Ramsey will talk about this morning, but it's still quite a long road ahead of us. There's a lot of uncertainty, sense of optimism, and as I would summarize, just kind of a sense of opportunity um, to be really conscious and conscientious about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So lots of learning to be done. Per our normal routine, we have a number of items on the agenda for us today. Dr. Ramsey Asfour will give us an update, state of the medical field science. Lindsay will give us a short nutrition update today. I also have a special guest I'd like to welcome to the webinar today, my friend and colleague Nick Lawfrey, who is a Qigong instructor. I first met him when we were on a retreat with our clinic at the 1440 Multiversity Retreat Center. He leads the Qigong workshops there. And I recently reached out to him to see if he could lead us today on a short Qigong exercise. And then we're also talking together about some larger collaborations. So it's been a nice experience for me this week to start to work with Nick. And then Valerie is with us again. She'll lead us on a mindfulness exercise. And so again, thank you all for being here. It's our honor and pleasure to be able to offer you support during these difficult times. So with that, Ramsey, I'll let you jump in.
Thanks. Hi, everybody, and welcome again to our webinar and another session. This time, I'll go through a little bit of the basics and background, and then move on quickly to some interesting topics. There's been a lot in the news this week, and I'm sure and hoping there'll be a lot of questions, so you can even start your questions coming in pretty soon if you'd like to. So this week, this is today from this morning live website here. Today I want to focus on a little bit on the rest of the world. I want us to think about what's happening on a global scale outside of your state and also, of course, within your state. But let's be a little bit mindful what's happening in other places, and I'll be telling you why. Uh, Again, we're past the peak in most places in the country, except in certain jurisdictions. For example, Georgia has been in the news recently, and we'll skip that for now because it seems to be loading. But Georgia, Texas are not quite at their peak. So there's quite a few states that are not at their peak. And just in the news is New Zealand and Australia. What have they done differently than we have done? Why is their growth rate very low? So their current growth factor is 0.72. And to control the outbreak, you need to keep it below 1. So that's quite impressive. Of course, it's essentially an island continent / nation, as is New Zealand. So this is interesting and been in the news. And looking at New Zealand from yesterday, so they of course have fewer cases, only 17 deaths in their country. But if you look at New Zealand in black and Australia in yellow, the percentage of the population being infected, actively infected, has been dropping, and so they've flattened their curves. If you look at on this website, you can add a country like the United States, and if you did that, you can see that we are just barely flattening here, whereas they have already sort of flattened their curve. Taking the U.S. out makes their success more interesting. And one thing to comment here is that I'm going to talk a little bit about politics because that's important going forward, and how we manage this. Unfortunately, it's been rather political, which is in our country especially. But I wanted to mention that in Australia, they have a right-wing government and a major opposition. I don't know if anybody knows about all the conflict there, and it was almost Trumpian in scale on the conflict between the right and the left. However, everyone is falling in line. They're having a very scientific and very transparent approach. New Zealand has a left-wing government, and the same thing, very transparent, very open approach. So in public health, that's the key, and we'll talk about why also as we go on further through this talk. As you've probably heard, that Georgia businesses began to reopen. FDA also, I just talked about Georgia really quickly. So the governor wanted to open. He had Trump's support. Trump withdrew his support. This is mixed signals are definitely not desirable. We have heard about a hidden outbreak spreading through the U.S. far earlier than we knew. This graphic is interesting, a little bit difficult to understand, but it's showing, according to this model by Northeastern, which I think overestimates the total number of cases, but they're talking about cases. By the time you had detectable cases, they're talking about having had 10,000 or almost 11,000 in New York, closer to 10,000 in San Francisco, and in Chicago, Seattle, Boston as well. So there is something to that, in that perhaps the epidemic was here earlier than we thought. I certainly don't think it was in much earlier than late January. So we're probably mid-January we had a significant number of cases, but going before that, I think is relatively unlikely. So here is New York released figures estimating 14% in the state have the coronavirus. So preliminary data shows that 21% of residents in New York City have antibodies. That means they've had the infection for coronavirus versus 3.6% in upstate New York and 11.7% in Westchester, which is where I went to medical school. So it's population density probably playing a role here, 21%. You could view that as good news and bad news. We'll talk about herd immunity in a little bit, but this is an interesting concept. And let's also take a peek at what's happening in other parts of the world, try to make it more global. So this is a cluster of COVID-19 in northern France. So they tested just a little bit more of a random sample, but they had about 17% of people being infected. And they are basically saying that their summary here is poignant. The relatively low infection rate, IAR they're calling it, actively in an area with SARS-CoV-2 actively circulated weeks before confinement measures indicates that establishing herd immunity will take time and that lifting these measures in France will be long and complex. So that's the state in France. I want to take a brief note and a timeout here for maybe some thoughts to the family of Patricia Dowd, who seems to be the first patient to have died of coronavirus in the United States on February 6th. She was 57. She was in relatively good health, and she probably had a heart attack. So this was a woman who did a lot of international travel, but apparently didn't travel right before she became ill. I don't know if she had traveled in December. We don't have all of the history, but keep in mind the serious nature and that there are people who have fallen ill from this around us. And we'll all find more and more of these people. Talking again about antibodies. So this is the Los Angeles data. They're implying that if you count that approximately 4.1% of the county's adult population had antibodies to this. Remember, these tests are error prone. There's a lot of unreliability. We don't know how fully reliable they are. Some people are saying that 1.5 to 5%, about around 1.5 to 2% false positive rate. So keep that in mind. But LA County, 4.1% is their estimate from their study. In the Stanford study, so way more people may have gotten coronavirus. So they say this is misleading, 50 and 85 times as many people. I think that's definitely a misleading take. And remember, it's about the error rate. Is the test
on the web?
Sorry, it's about the error rate of the test. So, but they said between 2.5 and 4.2%. But if you factor in an error rate, it's probably an overestimate. And this study, you always have to think of the biases of the study. So this study used a Facebook group or Facebook to recruit participants, which is interesting because you might see an ad on Facebook come through this study, and then you'll tell your friends, oh yeah, you had a cough recently. You had this runny nose recently. You had shortness of breath. You were just in China. So it might be a biased population. So be careful with the interpretation of the data. But nevertheless, an interesting study. This was actually released during our last session, I think, last week. Getting back to work, lots of things going on here. This is Emirates Airlines. They're going to test everybody with a new rapid test. Again, reliability is uncertain. So if you're going to fly on Emirates, you're going to be tested. So this is quite an interesting strategy to make airline travel more safe. I wanted to share that. I don't have stock there. And also like to choose some stories from other media instead of just the New York Times or California sources. So here's Breitbart. Customers ready for salon service as Georgia begins first phase of reopening. In my mind, that's risky. I'm quite concerned about doing that. So especially, they're not used to. I've always, as an infectious disease specialist, always been a little bit cautious about, did they clean the scissors between myself and the last customer? Did that scalpel? They're going to use the same, not scalpel, that's my medical terminology, the razor. Are they going to use the same razor on me that they use on somebody else? So in Europe, they're actually much more stringent, especially in Switzerland. They'll give you a brand new razor, they'll make a show of opening it. Here, they don't do that. So I don't let them use a razor on me ever, unless it's brand new. That's my bias. Here's from Fox News. Media erupt over Trump's comments on disinfectant and sunlight to cure coronavirus. There is always a kernel of truth that gets perhaps twisted in some interpretations. The truth is that ultraviolet light may help with killing or inactivating the virus, as will, of course, bleach, other disinfectants. We already know that works on surfaces, but you definitely don't want to consume them. You don't want many of those substances on your skin, and you certainly don't want them in your body. So be careful.
It is vital to discuss and address the threat of pandemic flu now. There is no pandemic flu in our country or in the world at this time. But if we wait for a pandemic to appear, it will be too late to prepare.
So I just wanted to quickly share this. This is W. And back in 2005, he launched a major initiative on pandemic preparedness. In fact, whatever your politics and however much you like W, a couple of really amazing programs for public health, global public health, were launched by him and his administration. One was the President's Emergency Fund for AIDS Relief. He launched it. I remember listening to the State of the Union live when I was in San Diego in my fellowship. And he also created the National Office of Pandemic Preparedness. So this is not a political issue. This is a global health issue that administrations on both sides, Obama's administration, did continue to support this, although they probably didn't make it as important as I would have liked to see. But keep that in mind, that this is an issue that all of us, and our pandemic preparedness office was started after 9/11 by George W. Bush. So I used to work at the World Health Organization, as many of you know, and I do have that international health sort of bias. So they have a lot of interesting information on their website. This is their coronavirus map, just to show you briefly. This morning, while I was on my exercise bike trainer in my garage, I was listening to the live new global collaboration that they announced to accelerate COVID health technologies and vaccine initiatives. So this is a major collaboration. There were notably no American governmental people participating. You might have heard that Trump wanted to defund the US contribution to the WHO, which is of major concern to myself. There are, for several reasons. First of all, the US is the biggest donor to the World Health Organization. Number two, the US has much of the world's expertise in these matters. And number three, the staffers at WHO, the way WHO is staffed, it's a politically created organization where you have the number of people working is commensurate with the size of your country and the size of your donation. So there's more Americans working at World Health Organization than any other. And those Americans contribute greatly. They have a fantastic work ethic. They just do a great job in the organization. All my American and of course non-American friends, but I'm calling out to the American friends now who might have their contract renewals at risk because they no longer have the support of the government, which would decrease a lot of it'd be a big brain drain on the WHO. So that was disastrous news when I heard it. And I think you all need to be cognizant of that, supporting international health organizations, especially World Health Organization. Also, to call your attention to our own Center for Disease Control. They've got a lot of interesting resources, small businesses, for schools, for others. We're helping people schools plan for reopening. working on some guidance for some small businesses or medium-sized businesses as well. There are some resources on the CDC website that get updated almost on a daily basis. I want to switch gears. I know that I have a functional medicine audience, but the vaccine rate drop is a huge concern for pediatricians during the pandemic. So this is going on, and measles deaths are surging worldwide, okay? And the coronavirus could make it worse because now people are afraid, or the vaccination programs are being curtailed because of the pandemic. And this is a brand new study that came out on the 20th of April, okay, so just a few days ago, from the Cochrane Review, vaccines for measles, mumps, and rubella and varicella in children. So just this is a great study, and they have a plain language summary, and the results were dramatic, that 138 studies with more than 23 million children in this grouping, and the unwanted effects were that did not cause autism, encephalitis, or any other suspected unwanted effect. If you go down into the details, there were some complications, and actually they do mention that here in plain language. Our analysis showed very small risks of fits, meaning seizures, due to high temperature or fever around 2 weeks after vaccination, and of a condition where blood does not normally clot, that's called ITP, in vaccinated children. So of note, measles causes this problem directly itself. So is that severe or not? But they were looking specifically for autism and encephalitis, which they did not find, and the effectiveness of the vaccines was very high, in the high 95% range. And they also looked at the strains that were used. The strains in the US that are used in the vaccines are safer than in much of the rest of the world. And that study goes on to say that, just so you can see. So I want to talk a little bit about South Africa. I lived in South Africa. I worked in HIV and building up HIV and AIDS treatment capacity, along with some TB. And so South Africa is an interesting case. Their curve is flattening, and partly because they have a lot of contact tracers already in place that help with TB and HIV. So all of our work, and my work at WHO, was about task shifting. There aren't enough doctors or nurses, so we're getting lay people to do a lot of this work, training them to go out to people's houses who have TB, who have HIV, give them the medications. If they are on the medications, that works to prevent further spread for those diseases. But those workers are now being used for HIV. They had a whole cadre of workers that are already trained. All you have to do is give them a little bit more training about COVID-19, and they're ready to go. So that's a very interesting and encouraging site. So we have the worldometer here. You can look at different cases in different countries. You can go to different continents. If you wanted to look at South Africa, you can go here and click on South Africa, total number of cases. So the number of total cases is not a logarithmic scale, it's a linear scale. We're often seeing logarithmic scales. It's still increasing, and the daily new cases have popped up recently, but much less than many other parts of Africa. And you can see active cases are seeming to plateau, and probably, and the death rate in a country, the population of which is probably around the size of California, has about 75 deaths. So we have way more in California, and they are headed into winter, whereas we are headed into summer. So I'll skip this in the interest of time, but their daily infection rate is dropping. I thought that was quite interesting. I wanted to talk about herd immunity. So you might have heard this in the media or read about it. So we need to get to a point where a certain percentage of the population has antibodies and is protected against the disease. So how does this work? So this is a very interesting simulation. So I'm actually just going to restart it or we'll watch it go on. But do you see, now let me restart that. Hold on a second. So this is a simulation of, these are vaccinated people, 10%. The blue is vaccinated, the yellow is unvaccinated. And you can see when you have more people vaccinated, or a certain number of people vaccinated, you get herd immunity. You get, most people get protected. So how does that really work? And how many viral particles or viral infections do you need to really make this a significant infection? And there's some randomness to this model. The last time I ran it, we had more red on this side. And it is a random thing, but you can see what, depending on what the vaccination rates are, you can get more and more immunity. So for COVID-19, we need somewhere in the 80% range to have herd immunity to significantly protect those around us. Remembering that the vulnerable people, immunocompromised and elderly, are being sheltered in place a little bit more. So that's an interesting concept. But I'm thinking, and most people are thinking, we need something closer to 80 or even the high 80 or 90% to have that sustained. So that's why for measles, for example, if we don't have 90% vaccination rates, we'll have an outbreak at Disneyland like we did a couple of years ago. So this is a problem because measles kills people. We forget that. A lot of what's going on here is that we might have more deaths from measles, mumps, rubella, HIV, TB, malaria. There's a lot of things going on in terms of other diseases being neglected at the expense of COVID. So pediatricians aren't giving vaccines because they're doing remote visits. You can't really give a vaccine remotely. So there is some importance of vaccines. Briefly on the science, basically, we should not be treating everybody with hydroxychloroquine, or maybe not treating anybody at this point. I think we're finding that a lot of the data doesn't look as good as we would have liked it to look. So, and then this is the big trial that came out preliminarily about veterans that were hospitalized with COVID-19, finding essentially no evidence that the use of hydroxychloroquine, either without or with azithromycin, reduced the risk of being on a ventilator. So this is a retrospective study, lots of problems with it, but that's what we're finding. So jumping to treatments that are unproven could actually be risky rather than helpful. So with that, I'll leave, we'll have some time for questions. There's one question about masking or not masking while cycling. It's a good question, and it depends on your county or your jurisdiction's regulations, but it would be rather difficult, especially in warm weather, to wear a mask while you're cycling. If you're likely to come in close contact within 6 feet of somebody, then you should wear a mask. So if you're a road cyclist like I am, you might carry a mask in one of your pockets, so that if you go down and grab a snack from somewhere, or you're going to be in close contact with people at some point, you might want to pop that mask on. Somebody asked about herd immunity in Sweden. So much travel during the holiday seasons. Students traveling wonder if late December, early January already in the US before travel bans. Absolutely, it was here in the US before the travel bans. How early is questionable. Probably mid to late January, but we don't know that. It could have been a little bit earlier. And how do people determine whether antibodies actually ensure immunity? That is a difficult question. And for COVID-19, we don't know. For measles and mumps, it's easy. We know. For other vaccine preventable diseases, we know. For influenza, it doesn't work that well. That's why you have to get a flu shot every year, in a sense. So that's something to think about. Somebody's asking, what about hydroxychloroquine plus Ditro plus vitamin C? look, I think frankly, let's first of all do no harm. So the toxicity of hydroxychloroquine, especially with azithromycin, is significant in terms of prolonging the time when your heart will contract and then relax. We call that the QT interval. And so if your heart is contracted for too long, you're more at risk of arrhythmias. And that's what this drug does. It makes your heart contract or stay contracted longer than it normally would. And that can cause a rhythm disturbance that can kill people. So especially if you're outside the hospital and you're not on a cardiac monitor, you wouldn't know. So that's a major concern. I would be very hesitant to do that. However, vitamin C is super safe. We know that. So 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams a day, as we've said. I don't think, I think it might be helpful. We don't know that it will be helpful. We don't think it would be harmful. Again, we're going back to all of the same things that we learned before. One question on BCG vaccine. There is a trial ongoing. That's a vaccine for TB that is given in most of the world, but not Europe and not the United States. And maybe that can be helpful. We're not sure on that yet. Again, another trial. Anything new from last week on what to do or not to avoid infection, or what to do when we get sick? So again, avoiding infection is the things that we've talked about. I don't think there's much new, but sleep, stress management, forest bathing. You know, if you can get out and walk, get out in nature. If you're in New York City or downtown San Francisco, maybe you can walk a little bit. They were talking this morning that I heard Bill de Blasio talking about opening parks and how it's going to go with parks and the warmer weather in New York and what are the mitigation strategies. So we're learning about all of that. So pretty soon we're going to have more widely available testing. And Mayor Garcetti in Los Angeles has said that everybody in LA that wants to be tested will soon be able to. And we're working on more swabs. Gavin Newsom announced that we've received more swabs from the feds, which is great. So hopefully we'll have more information there coming up soon.
I have one thing I want to jump in with Ramsey on the what to do if you do get sick question. And you know, we've sent out a number of recommendations on some helpful herbs and supplements, etc. But there was an interesting article in the New York Times that I think is worth discussing that talked about the fact that when people are getting sick with this strain of coronavirus, there is there's different phases as we've talked about. There's an initial phase that you frequently manifest the fever and maybe even a dry cough and systemic symptoms, headache, malaise, etc. but you don't yet have a severe shortness of breath or severe difficulty breathing, and so you might be just staying at home and managing that and going from there, keeping close eye, obviously. But what's interesting actually is the doctors, I think, were being surprised by the fact that even before those people are showing a significant shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, their oxygen levels have already dropped, and that's not being picked up. And so what we're then seeing is that without really noticing it or feeling it, people are breathing more rapidly and they're breathing more deeply to compensate for that. And that physiological response is actually also contributing to damage to the lungs and causing harm to the lung tissue, the lung cells, etc. And that when they then finally do present to the emergency room, the doctors have found themselves pretty much behind the eight ball in terms of how severe the low oxygen levels are. And so they're finding that the quicker they can diagnose that level of low oxygen and even get people just on supplemental oxygen therapy through nasal cannula, for example, that might be one way to really avoid then having people go on to need a ventilator. And so one thing I think, if you can, I think that there's been like many different things in this crisis, has been a run on a lot of different supplies, but there's a very simple pulse oxygen device that you can purchase online And I have looked recently on Amazon, for example, they are available. It's just a little device that clips on the end of your finger. It's about this big, and little red light shows up, and it then provides you with a number for your oxygen level and also for your heart rate. And so, if you do get sick, I think that would be something. Some people are just deciding to monitor their oxygen every day and just kind of keep track of it, and then see where the trend goes. But if you do get sick, and we can pick up if you're having a low desaturation of oxygen earlier, that is really important and potentially a place to intervene so that we can get you on oxygen sooner and avoid complications and lung damage.
But you can also, and some people might have a hard time getting this, you can also measure your own respiratory rate. So how fast you're breathing.
Yeah.
Notice that you're breathing. Normally, at rest, you should be breathing roughly 12 to 14, 16 breaths per minute. If you're breathing at 18 or 20 breaths per minute and you're feeling sick, then that's something that would trigger a concern. So you should communicate that to your health provider and go in to get seen. So don't, if you're feeling sick, you need to communicate with your health provider or one of us if it's us, and if you can get us urgently, then, but really go to your primary doctor, urgent care, or emergency room, and don't be shy about doing that. Look, there's not that much activity in lots of parts of the country. UCSF is starting to do more surgeries that they've been holding that are deemed essential but not emergent. And so we have capacity in hospitals to take care of you, and they're being very proactive. So if your respiratory rate is high, that's a concern, and you should communicate that to your health provider. The reading on the pulse oximeter should be, normal is high 90s, so 98% to 100% is high. If you're at 92%, that's a danger sign. 92% or lower, that would be a major danger sign. And you should normally be, 97 to 100%. It depends on the quality and accuracy of the device. But it's very easy to count your respiratory rate and have somebody else count it for you, a stopwatch, and count it yourself. That's the most reliable method.
Yeah, and I do sometimes routinely see people in the office who sometimes are in the 92, 93 range. So, but certainly, in the 88 to 92 range would be time to go in and get checked out. And people are, just for reference, people are sometimes showing up in the hospital with oxygen in the 70 or even 60s or lower even in this situation. So, as a reference. Aura Ring is not a supplement for this, because the Aura Ring really just reports your readings overnight and not necessarily on demand and sort of like a spot check. That said, you can look at the Aura Ring for trends on heart rate overnight, also temperature, respiratory rate, et cetera, and kind of get a gauge on overall health. In terms of the recommended pulse ox device, if you want to get one of those, I would just go on your online shopping and look for one, roughly in the $50 to $70 range. I think you're going to get a good quality device, and just look for one that's rated highly. So maybe one more question. Yeah, there's definitely interesting, data developing on the immune response. We touched on this in the webinar that we did specifically with Lyme patients and immune response to coronavirus. But there was a really good article yesterday in the Atlantic that I read looking at the cytokines, these immune, inflammatory markers, and in particular IL-6, and they're looking at, the fact that people with higher or lower IL-6, people with higher IL-6 tended to do worse. And so there's a number of different ways they're trying to see if, there's some medications that are used for other immune or autoimmune illnesses. They're trying to see if there might be an application here to lower IL-6 and help people not become as severely ill. But they also do note at the end of the article that sleep helps to lower IL-6. And so, just big picture reminder to really dial in and nail down all of those lifestyle factors: nutrition, inflammation control from that, healthy movement, stress reduction, mindfulness, Qigong, sleep, all these factors, we've been drilling them home with everybody, but they work and they are scientifically based, and and they're easy to access, and there are no side effects. And so really, strong recommendations to use this as a time to really dial all of those in. So with that, thank you so much, Ramsey. That was excellent. And with that, Lindsay, if you want to jump in and give us a little presentation, that'd be wonderful.
All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great, okay. So I have a short but sweet presentation today. Basically, I just wanted to cover a couple cool articles that I found over the course of this past week related to COVID and nutrition. So it's been interesting to see within kind of the more conventional medical space, some nutrition recommendations coming out. And I have two articles here. One was from the Harvard THCN public health website, and they had have a whole article on there about nutrition and supplements for COVID. And then another article is from the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and I wanted to feature this one because it actually surprisingly contains some recommendations that go kind of in line with an ancestral diet, which we don't often see egg yolks and oysters and things recommended by our public health authorities. So I thought that was interesting. But in the European Journal article, some of the things they talked about were actually eating foods that contain or promote the synthesis of serotonin or melatonin at dinner. And their reasoning behind this was that sleep is really important for your immune system. A lot of us are really stressed out, and that'll actually affect melatonin production. So by eating some foods that support the synthesis of those neurotransmitters, serotonin's a neurotransmitter, melatonin's a hormone, at night, that could potentially help with stress management and sleep. And then kind of some things I talked about in past weeks. They recommend that you get plenty of zinc. So they talk about poultry, red meat, pumpkin seeds, and oysters as good sources. I've gotten some questions just from various people about what kind of oysters to get. So I recommend the Crown Prince smoked oysters, and I think that's a pretty widely available brand. And then they also talked about the importance of getting sufficient vitamin D, both from sunlight and then from your diet. So again, we've talked about this before, but eating plenty of fish. They mentioned liver, which I thought was neat because we often tout the health benefits of liver. So it was kind of cool to see that mentioned. And then egg yolks as well. And they emphasized getting plenty of antioxidant nutrients like beta carotene from sweet potatoes, carrots, and green leafy veggies, and then vitamin C from red peppers, oranges, strawberries, broccoli, mangoes, and lemons. And in the Harvard article, I didn't have enough space on here to include a couple points in there, but they kind of reiterated some of these points. And then they also made the recommendation that if you are low in vitamin D, you want to make sure that you're maybe supplementing with enough to reach a healthy level. I think usually the 40 to 60 nanogram per milliliter range is a good goal. A couple things I didn't necessarily agree with were for vitamin E, they're recommending soybean oil and other things. So I think you guys are probably pretty nutrition savvy already and know to avoid those. But regardless, it was cool to see some COVID specific nutrition recommendations coming out. And then another interesting couple of articles that go together that I came across this week emphasizes the importance of blood sugar management in our current situation. We already knew that diabetes is a major risk factor for COVID and also for experiencing a more severe course of illness. And a paper came out just a few days ago with a doctor kind of presenting a theory. It's more of a theory that the higher blood sugar levels provide more sugar to bind to the ACE2 receptor, which we talked about before. That's how the SARS, this novel coronavirus enters cells. And apparently the receptor needs sugar attached to it and the virus needs sugar attached to it in order to enter the cell. And possibly by having higher blood sugar levels, that could potentially provide more entry portals into the body. So the implications of that were that we want to make sure we're managing our own blood sugar. A quote from the author that I thought was interesting, basically he was saying that it's not only people with diabetes and pre-diabetes who should be aware and managing their blood sugar right now, but there's a lot of people out there with high blood sugar who are not aware of it. So something to consider if you've had any kind of blood sugar issues in your life, that now would be a good time to really hone in on your diet and make sure that you're eating foods that support healthy blood sugar levels for you. And then along those lines, another interesting thing I found was that hemoglobin A1C may be considered as a biomarker for identifying at-risk people for COVID, because it is a pretty good marker over the course of 3 months, generally, to look at like kind of what your average blood sugar has been. And yeah, so managing blood sugar by cutting out refined carbs and refined sugars, focusing more on nutrient-dense carbs like sweet potato, winter squash, berries, etc., would be a good way to go right now. And even with these foods, people's tolerance for those will, depend on their unique situation, but it's generally a pretty good set of carbs to focus on for blood sugar control. And then also, there are a bunch of lifestyle strategies you can do for managing blood sugar as well. These are, sorry, the heading should say lifestyle, not nutrition. But these are kind of the things we've been talking about repeatedly. So getting movement in, particularly taking a walk after meals may help with blood sugar management, because it helps shuttle sugar into your muscles, because you're moving your muscles rather than allowing it to keep circulating at a high level. It looks like, according to this study, it was like about 30 minutes after a meal is kind of like the ideal time to go on a walk. So I've been doing that myself and recommending it to people. Managing stress is really important for managing blood sugar. And then also prioritizing sleep and fitting in some physical activity every day. And then, in terms of meal composition, trying to eat as balanced of meals as you can. So rather than doing carbs on their own, just trying to combine it with a healthy portion of protein, some fats, some fiber-rich, non-starchy veggies, and that can actually help slow down the blood sugar kind of fluctuations that happen after eating. That's all I have for you today.
Great, that was super helpful. Thank you, Lindsay. And yeah, just kind of, a good opportunity to remind ourselves that, some of the basic things that we always think about and talk about in our practice and in the field of functional medicine, there's a lot of reasons as to why these work. And, blood sugar balance, that's really interesting. I hadn't looked at those recent articles, Lindsay, about how, A1C and blood sugar status in general is a risk factor potentially for COVID, but it makes total sense. When you have those elevated blood sugar levels, your inflammation levels are higher, and your hormone levels shift, and there's a number of different factors inside the body that change. Everything is interconnected, so it's all cross-communicating. And so those really simple suggestions can really have a powerful effect. I would also add, in addition to taking a walk and getting out moving and exercising, specifically adding some weightlifting to your day or to your weekly routine. It doesn't have to be, a gym with huge barbells, et cetera. It could just be a small set of different weight dumbbells at home, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20, 25 pounds. You can get a range of them. But adding in a little bit of a weightlifting routine and some strength training is a whole nother mechanism of how sugar can be moved from the bloodstream into the body. So independent of the insulin and the pancreas and the whole hormone cycle that has to happen there, there are blood sugar, GLUT4 blood sugar glucose receptors on the muscles that are activated by weightlifting. And so they'll take that, because basically the muscles need more energy in that setting, right? You're building those muscles. So, gentle weightlifting on a regular basis is another really, really important way to balance blood sugar. So good, that was nice and sweet. And so now it's we're going to mix it up a little bit. And again, I'm going to welcome my friend and colleague Nick Laufrey to come on and lead us in a short Qigong session. And before we do that, actually, Nick, we have this routine in our weekly meeting of getting a little measurement on our physiology. And so, as we have done in the past, I want everyone, we're going to just take a minute and check in with ourselves and do the 2 steps that we've done, which is number 1, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate how stressed do you feel. 1 is no stress, 10 is extremely stressed. So what is your perceived stress right now on a scale of 1 to 10? I put a link into the chat box for us to record these and send the data over to us, and we can graph these. You can hold on to that link for now and just enter your data from now. Please don't put it in the chat box. Just use that link either from the Zoom chat or else on our website. You can click on the green COVID-19 tab on the upper right, and then the survey form has a link towards the bottom of that page. And the next thing we're going to measure is our heart rate. So remembering, where to locate our pulse, which is either on our neck with 2 fingers, or you can also feel it on your wrist. And again, this is sort of on the thumb side of the wrist, using 2 or 3 fingers. Just push your fingers in there until you feel a little heart rate pulse moving there. So either option is fine. And I'm just going to set the timer for 30 seconds and let you guys count. So I'll tell you when to start counting, and I'll tell you when to stop counting. So if you can feel your pulse, let's go ahead and start in 3, 2, 1, now. And stop. Okay, so take that number, multiply it by 2, and then you can either keep those written down by hand and enter them later into the form, or you can enter those now and wait to submit it until after we do our Qigong and after Valerie leads us on some mindfulness. Again, I just like to provide some numbers for you guys in terms of how effective all this is on our bodies. So great, Nick, with that, everybody welcome Nick Laufrey, and he'll guide us on a short Qigong exercise.
Great. Well, so fun being here, sharing this with you guys. Qigong, Qi means energy. Gong means work. Most people know the word Gong from Gong Fu, which we mispronounce Kung Fu. Kung Fu really means the cultivation of a skill over time, right? So we're cultivating a skill here with our Qi. Qi can mean this kind of very mystical thing, this kind of energy, life force energy or whatever. Some energy that we haven't quite found with a microscope or anything, but that nonetheless you tend to feel when you do some of these practices. But Qi also means something broader. It just means function. It means the overall function of your body. So we say things in Qigong like, oh, your kidney Qi, or the function of your liver Qi, right? And this really just means how well are your organs functioning? What is the Qi of your mind? What is the Qi of your emotions? The function, the process of these things. So what we do in Qigong is actually really common sense. We're going to use movements, posture, breath, and some of our attention to change our function, our Qi, our energy in our body. And the way it is so common sense. It's really like if you're depressed, think about what your posture does, right? We collapse, right? So what if we open our chest when we're depressed, right? Or when we're anxious, right? We tend to be a little shaky. We're moving around really fast, right? When we're stressed, we're usually thinking a lot about the future, right? So what if instead of moving around quickly and shakily, we move very slowly and smoothly, right? What if instead of focusing on our thoughts that are projecting into the future, we focused on our body, which is stuck in the present? We made our mind more present, right? So we're going to create patterns with our movement, with our breath, with our posture. And these patterns are going to emulate the way we want our mind and our emotions and the function of our body to mirror. Okay? So usually Qigong is done standing, so if you can find a little bit of space, you don't need a lot, just enough to stand with your feet shoulder width and move your arms around a little bit without knocking things over. So this first one is called the vibrating horse. So it's kind of a goofy one, but it's really good to just kind of shake out the patterns that we hold in our body when we have stress. When we're stressed, we usually have certain muscles that are tensed up. So here we're just going to shake those patterns out. You're going to start with your hips. So start to turn your hips. A little bit like the hokey pokey. Like I said, Qigong is kind of common sense stuff. Let it rise up to your chest. And start to go down your arms and to your hands. Shake your hands like you're trying to get water off your fingers, flicking water off your hands, and then relax. And you might feel your body is buzzing a little bit. Actually, when we shake and vibrate our body, the collagen that makes up our bones and connective tissues actually makes electricity out of that kinetic energy. So let's do this a little quicker. We just shake our hips, chest, shoulders, arms, hands. So think like a horse when it has flies on its skin. Gets them off. Let's go a little quicker. Take a big breath in. Sigh out your mouth. As we shake from the hips out to the hands. Again, in through the nose, big breath. Shake hips, chest, down to the hands. A couple more times. Big breath in the nose, big sigh out the mouth. Or if you do it wrong, it's totally fine. Good. Pause again. Feel your body. You might feel this little tingling, especially in the hands. Hands are very sensitive to this kind of electrical buzz. Just feel your body. Good. Next one. We're just going to take our hands up, make light fists, come onto the tiptoes. We're going to drop the heels, and again, flick the hands. So we come up, drop, up, drop, up, drop. Inhale, exhale. Again, we're looking to vibrate our body, this time using the knocking of the heels into the floor. And the throwing of the hands, the sighing of the breath out the mouth, they're all symbolic of clearing our patterns of tension, stress, stuck energy, stuck emotions. In Qigong, we see our emotions not as just being located up on our head. We see them through our whole body. And that's really how we experience our emotions, isn't it? When we feel emotions, we say, oh, my heart, or oh, butterflies in my stomach, right? Let go of any stuck patterns. Good. Again, slow it down. Pause. Just notice how you feel. Take a deep breath. Good. So now that we've cleared out the patterns that we want to eliminate, let's start to cultivate the pattern that we want to create. So again, with our feet shoulder width apart, knees a little soft, we're just going to start to float the hands up to shoulder height and then float them down. We just do this with our breath. I'll show you from the side. Inhale up, exhale down. Nice long inhale on the way up. Long exhale on the way down. We're moving slowly here. It might even be almost a little bit uncomfortable how slow it is. The point here is that when we slow down, we pay attention. When are we the least mindful? When we're rushing around, multitasking. We do the opposite. Slow down, do one simple thing. Bring your mind into the present as your mind pays attention to the body. Inhaling through the nose. If it's comfortable, exhale through the nose too. Just a few more times. Keep your shoulders relaxed. You don't have to come all the way up if your shoulders hurt. Just come halfway up. And then closing movement. It's called pulling down the sky. We just float the hands up. And the palms face towards your body. You just scan down. And your mind is just going to follow your hands down through your body. You're going to inhale up. Hands up. Attention is in your palms. And then exhale. Bring your attention to just scan down through your body, head to toe. It's passing through your body like water through soil. Exhale down, scan your body. Inhale up. Nice and slow. Long, slow breaths. Just one more time. This time the hands will come down. Hands bringing your attention down to your lower abdomen. Hands will just fold just below your navel. I'm just going to relax here. Just take a few deep abdominal breaths. As you inhale, feel your belly expand a little bit, pushing the hands slightly out. And as you exhale, feel your belly relax back in. Inhale, belly expands. Exhale, belly relaxes back in. It's like there's a balloon inflating and deflating. What this does, by breathing here, it draws our attention here to the belly. So we're dropping our attention below our thinking mind, below even our emotional mind, down into our body mind, belly. It's like 3 more deep breaths. Just let your mind sink like a stone to the bottom of a lake, settling at the bottom. We'll close just by circling the belly. That's a few circles around the belly. You can just pick up one foot and the other. Just kind of massage your feet with the floor. They say this is where we store our chi, we store our life energy here at the lower abdomen. Call it the dantian, the elixir field. Very good. Stop below the navel. Take a big breath in, and we'll just drop the hands with a sigh. Nice. Good. You can check in, see how your chi feels. Just notice any changes to your body or mind. I'm sure Sunjay will lead you through some checking your pulse again or something. That, my friends, is Qigong.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you, Nick. Something really magical about Qigong is a practice that I've used for about 15 years, and just really magical combination of movement combined with mindfulness, combined with deep breathing. You know, you get your lymph moving, get your nervous system balanced. There's just a lot that's built in there over thousands of years to really support health and nervous system and relaxation. And so that was great, Nick. I thought that went super well. I hope everybody enjoyed that. And stay tuned for some future projects that Nick and I are developing. So with that, I'd like to move back over to Valerie, and welcome back, Valerie. Please take it away.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And Nick, thank you so much for that. That was incredibly helpful and lightening and energizing and expansive. Really, really appreciate that.
We will, sorry, Valerie, we will wait. We'll wait to check our pulse and stress level until, Valerie, when you're done. So
Okay.
let these exercises build on each other.
Okay.
We'll be at the end. That was one question. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, great. No, that sounds great. I assumed that when you didn't jump in and test again, but it's going to be a good measurement this week. I'm sure of that. So today we're going to tap into a potent inner resource for healing, wisdom, and relaxation called the Inner Advisor. And before we do that, I've got to tell you a little bit of the backstory behind the Inner Advisor. You know, she or he is a part of our unconscious mind, meaning that we are usually unaware of it. It idles there like a dormant program or app on our favorite device. It's profound power to bring ease, clarity, balance to our being, largely overlooked by us. And we were taught to neglect it during our earliest years. We think of our unconscious as being the repository of all our old childhood wounds, of unhappy memories, of the selfish or mean-spirited parts of ourselves that we choose to rein in and not act on. And that's true. But starting in early childhood, we also learn to suppress the best and brightest parts of ourselves. Have you noticed just how often you see little kids and children being incredibly wise, caring, and sunny? How they'll just say something so insightful or impulsively do something so selfless and caring that it just takes your breath away. Sometimes this incredible vulnerability combined with the inner strength and knowing of the child makes adults around them uncomfortable. And kids are told not to be such little Yodas. So we learn to curb our open-hearted caring. Then we start school and it's on. We must adapt. We have to learn to fit in and to be accepted. Slowly, over time, our earliest compassion and wisdom gets whittled down because we have to win social approval. We have to be cool. We have to please our teachers, coaches, parents. This process is called socialization. And there's a gender difference to our socialization that is softening in North America, which is great, but it still is could use some improvement. Girls are allowed to stay rooted in their vulnerable feeling selves until about age 8 to 11. For boys, this begins much earlier, even in 2020, and they begin to learn how to close down between 3 and 5. It can be subtle, but it happens. So the most intuitive, super sharp part of ourselves, the utterly open-hearted, creative part, gets repressed, and we don't even know it. But there's times when we know the inner advisor is present. Have you ever been thinking of someone and then they call? Or maybe you're looking for a parking spot on Saturday afternoon downtown, and you get this impulse, I'm going to turn left here. And just where you needed to park and wanted to go into, somebody's pulling out their keys to get into their car and drive away. Or sometimes perhaps in your life, you've just known that the stranger in front of you will become or could become a best friend. Or maybe you've been struggling with a problem, really leaning into it, and all of a sudden the complete solution jumps into your head all at once. That's the inner advisor. It's an intuitive, synergistic way to process and relate to our world. We're going to take a few minutes right now to make friends with your inner advisor. So, as ever, take a few minutes to settle in. If you're sitting or lying down, make sure you're comfortable. Feet are uncrossed, arms are uncrossed. Wriggle about, support your pillows or chair a little bit, get them to support you a little bit better. Put down anything on your lap, put it on the table or desk or whatnot. So you can just really give yourself the attention that your inner advisor deserves. Great. So when you're ready, if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, please do so. If that's not a comfortable experience for you, please just look down into your lap or at your hands. That's fine, just as well. And as ever, we begin by taking a couple of very slow, deep breaths. And when I do this work, I call that your transition breath. You're transitioning from your outer world to your inner focus. You're breathing in through your nose as slowly as you can, and out through your mouth as steadily as you can, to mark the transition between being active and being still. And just allow your mind to focus into that sensory awareness of your belly, diaphragm, ribs, lungs, gently expanding and then releasing. Perhaps you notice the air flowing in through your nose, you can feel it, and out over your lips in a way that works for you. Just find your own rhythm with this. Some people like to pause between the in-breath and the out-breath. That's wonderful. Others prefer a continuous cyclic breath, and that's just as wonderful. Just finding your own way to settle in, breathing in nourishing, cleansing oxygen, and releasing and letting go. So you feel more confident that you're automatically and effortlessly dropping into ease and mental focus with every breath. Every breath, allowing your body-mind to automatically reset and go within, where you can let go into contentment and peace automatically with every breath. And it feels so good to do this that it habituates quite easily. And if you've been with this program for the last 6 weeks or so, you'll probably notice from doing this just once a week that your mind gets more focused with every slow breath you take. And your body just kind of drops into ease, comfort, contentment. And while your mind becomes more focused, allow it to take you to your favorite place, a beautiful place where you feel even more at ease and even more comfortable. And it could be the same place you've been going to, or it could be a new place every time. Doesn't really matter. Just you enjoy taking in with every slow, deep breath the beauty surrounding you, which allows you to feel more comfortable, more relaxed. And as you take in the colors and the scenery, perhaps you can hear the background sounds that are so sweet, so comforting and familiar. And as you take in those lovely sounds that bring you more clarity and peace, and the vista the familiar, beautiful scenery and objects around you. Perhaps you can inhale the fragrance of this very special place. This place that allows you to feel utterly at ease, totally safe. And as you let go, releasing with every breath and inhaling the fragrance, the energy of this favorite place, you realize more and more exactly why you chose this place. It's more than the scenery and the dear familiar objects and the beauty, which takes you deeper within. It's more than the sights and sounds and smells, which are so very restful to your soul. It's all this, but it's more. There's a healing presence here, which is palpable. And that's exactly what brings you here, what draws you to this place. And your dawning, growing awareness of this healing energy in its own way surrounds you in this place. It's just where you feel good, clear and relaxed and energized. This palpable energy, as you breathe it in, you recognize that the healing, calming energy of this beautiful place, you're inhaling it, and its molecules, its atoms, it's flowing right into you, into your lungs, and out through your bloodstream into every cell and organ of your whole being, can let go into this fantastic energy, which is just right for you. It's just right for you. So easy, so natural, so automatic. And with every breath you take, you continue to appreciate exactly why this healing place is such a powerful, palpable energy for you. In fact, there seems to be even more there for you. Perhaps you can sense the presence of somebody who's very loving and wise, somebody who has your best interests at heart. And best of all, perhaps you can sense the presence of somebody who knows the big picture, the big plan for your whole life. And you don't perhaps quite see them yet, but you certainly feel their energy on top of the palpable healing energy of being here. Perhaps it's like eyes that you feel on your back, or just a warmth of an energetic embrace. So put your warmest, welcoming smile on and slowly turn around. Look about and notice what the very first critter, the very first animal is, just like that jumps into your head. Just notice your inner advisor. It doesn't matter if your inner advisor has 8 legs or no legs, or 2 legs or 4, or perhaps your inner advisor has fins and flippers. Doesn't really matter. Just let it be the very first critter without any kind of editing or judging that comes to mind. And take that in and appreciate how willing your inner advisor is to meet with you, how instantly they showed up. And thank them. And tell the inner advisor your name and offer them a small treat, a small gift of some type, as a token of your appreciation for showing up. And ask your inner advisor what their name is. Again, let it be the very first name that jumps into your head, the very first one. And isn't that wonderful to have this form of spontaneous communication with this critter who's loving, wise, has your best interests at heart. And for today, simply ask your inner advisor if he or she would be willing to talk to you for a few minutes. Just ask, invite them, will you talk to me? And follow where that conversation leads. And regardless of their response, allow yourself to become a bit more connected so you feel a bit more rapport with your inner advisor. Maybe you sit down a little closer to one another. Maybe they approach you or you approach them. But just take in who and what they are and how good you feel in their presence. And if windows, our eyes are the windows to the soul, maybe you look in their eyes and see who's inside, which makes you feel even better and a bit more connected. And while the two of you communicate, have a conversation, or perhaps you just kind of admire each other, the shape, the size, the spontaneity, you can ask a question of your inner advisor. And this question can be as simple as, how do I get better sleep to improve my immune system? Or it could be a question as simple as, what's my next step in life? What's my next step? Or it could be a question concerning a problem, a challenge you're facing that you're just not sure about. So go ahead and ask your question. Today, we just have time for one question. But let it be the first question that settles into your mind, the one that has the most energy to it, if you're trying to decide which question. And let the response be the very first response that comes up, just like that. Because remember, our unconscious mind loves to cooperate with us through the language of spontaneity, which is so different from how we often operate in our day-to-day lives. So for now, go with what's spontaneous, because you'll have plenty of time when this exercise is over to sift and sort and analyze and critique and judge. But for now, we put all of that aside and simply allow ourselves to have a spontaneous conversation about something that matters to us. And you'll have 1 minute of clock time, which will be all the time in the world to have this conversation, starting now. And as you move towards winding down your conversation for now, again, thank your inner advisor for showing up in any way or form that he or she did. And give them another little treat, this encouragement to continue to develop your relationship. And perhaps in your mind's eye, repeat a few times what your inner advisor communicated and expressed, so you can better anchor it into your conscious mind. And before we wind down for now, make a date in real time that will be sometime in the next week when you'll check in with your inner advisor. Let it be a realistic, practical date. Maybe you'll have a Google image search where you'll find an image of your inner advisor and print it out and paste it to the side of your desk. Or maybe you'll simply invite your inner advisor to go for a walk with you in nature, or to sit on your shoulder while you read a book in the evening. It can be really simple. But just as though you had met in your outer world somebody who you really were connected to and was so kind and loving, and they said, well, let's get together sometime this week. And you said, yeah, in the park at 10 on Sunday morning, and then you blew them off and didn't show up. How likely would they then be to continue to want to move towards you? So it is with our inner advisors. So important to find a date that you'll really be able to honor in this playful, lighthearted, right brain way. Because that date will anchor your relationship and make the energy and insights of the inner advisor far more accessible to you every time you keep that commitment. So once you've got your date and you've said your farewells for now, allow the inner advisor to go inside your body, where your body most wants that energy, most could use the energy of your inner advisor. And slowly move around, appreciating your favorite place once again. Just take a look at the sights, the beauty, the horizon, all the colors that give you such soothing comfort. Really breathe into the sounds, the fragrance, the amazing quality that's here, which is yours. And allow all of that to fade into the background, where it will continue to support you and build in a way that's so good for you with every breath you take. As you bring your senses back to this room, this place, this time. Whenever you're ready, open your eyes. And invite you to take just a moment now to stretch or move, just to feel more comfortable after such a deeper relaxation. And if you've got your device in front of you or pen and paper in front of you, just jot down a few key phrases. We don't have the time for a long journaling exercise, but just capture the essence of what occurred. And that's yet another anchor between your unconscious healing resources and your conscious mind. And later on, a few days from now, the potency of what was said can easily get lost in the daily life flow. But when you see what you've written down now, while it's still so fresh, it'll take you right back there. It's a powerful follow-up for later on. Even though it seems simple now, it'll become more potent to you in a few days, whatever words you write down now. So do take a minute just to write down a few things. That's great, because now you've written down even a few words will prompt your memory later on to write down a few more, so you can continue with this inner exploration. So feel really welcome to email me any reflections, questions, insights about what was helpful, anything that came up for you that was problematic, what you found most curious or interesting. I'm really happy to respond offline later on to anything you might have to say. If we have a few minutes, I'll leave that up to Dr. Schwag. We could have a little bit of a Q&A as well. But I also wanted to add that, you know, sleep's important. Next week, everything we're going to do in this mindfulness exercise will be geared towards aligning the resources in your unconscious body-mind to give you better sleep. So that's for next week. Thanks.
Thank you, Valerie. That was wonderful. I need to do a little research into the Native American lore and understand a little bit about what the beaver as a totem animal means, because that's what came to my mind, this smiling beaver. So I'm curious to learn more as to what's behind that.
That's wonderful. There's something you need to know about that. If you don't understand what your inner advisor, why they took the shape they did, that's great. That means there's even more unknown, unconscious information coming up through that image. And again, people are just so surprised when they go and they do their research, because they find out that it aligns with what they needed in ways that are pretty remarkable. So I encourage everybody to make a research project of it. If it's not a familiar animal to you, if it hasn't, not somebody you've met before, go for it, you know, and pick any cultural background that appeals to you, because so many of these things that come up from our unconscious come up because it's a deep part of our universal heritage as humans. And one cultural lens may speak more strongly to you than another, because where these images come from in our unconscious is, in my opinion, usually beyond culture, society, faith, upbringing. They're profound universal experiences, you know, they're just in the gene pool. So thank you.
Points.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So before we have, if one or two people want to type in and give us some feedback or comments, that's great. But let's do our little physiology check. And again, just write down on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your current stress level, with 1 being none and 10 being very high. What is your current stress level on a scale of 1 to 10? And then again, checking your pulse, either on your neck or on some aspect of your wrist. When you have that ready, we'll go ahead and start counting in 1, 2, 3, and start. Sorry, stop there. Okay, so go ahead and write that number down. Multiply it by 2, and you have a link where you can enter that data, the before data and the after data, and go ahead and send that over to us. We'll work on calculating out the averages, et cetera, from this week, but just to kind of give you some feedback that, you know, over the last weeks, you know, the average for the group of the perceived stress has usually been in the 5 range, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4 before, and after our exercises goes down into the low to mid 3 range. That represents about a 30 to 40% decrease of perceived stress as a group. So that's pretty awesome, pretty profound. And heart rate, you know, has generally been 72, 73. First week, our heart rate as a group was higher, it was 78. So I think that was indicating, you know, we're all a little bit more stressed at that time. And then the follow-up after doing the exercises, our heart rates as a group have been around 66, 67, 73. So anywhere from 7 to 10% decrease of heart rate as a group. So just really important, short mindfulness exercise, a little bit of Qigong, a little bit of deep breathing. We absolutely can modulate our physiology. We can balance our nervous system. We can decrease the sympathetic or fight-flight nervous system. We can increase the parasympathetic or relaxation response to nervous system. That has effects all the way throughout the body, through every single organ and through every single cell, through our hormones, through our cytokines, our inflammatory molecules and mediators. And, this is the real deal, folks. This is science. Absolutely works. So please, whatever avenue you have that works, whether it's a practice you've already built, whether it's an app that guides you on meditation, whether it's reviewing our videos, where the exercises are recorded, getting out in nature, walking, playing music, whatever it gets you in that flow, please make sure you're doing it. And before we wrap up, is there one or two people who would like to chime in and kind of give us some feedback on how that was, or any other thoughts? You can unmute yourself on the lower left and type in if you'd like to. Okay, so again, thinking of all of you out there, sending you healing and light and good energy. Hope we all do well through these next week and onwards as we navigate this next transition. Thanks to our entire crew for being here with us. Special thanks to Nick for joining us today. I hope everybody out there has a wonderful week and stay safe. We'll talk with you next week.